The Secrets of Star Wars is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
Hi, this is Ashley Eckstein, the voice of Ahsoka Tano from Star Wars, and you're listening to the Secrets of Star Wars podcast. May the Force be with you.
You're listening to the Secrets of Star Wars, episode 71.
Hello there.
It's a power that Jedi have that lets them control people and make things float.
Impressive. Every word in that sentence was wrong.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
It's against my programming to impersonate a deity.
That's not how the Force works.
Force is with me, and I am with the Force, and I fear nothing.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
Hey everybody, I'm Father Andrew Kinstetter, aka Father Fett, and you're listening to the Secrets of Star Wars, where we talk about everything connected to that galaxy far, far away, including the deeper themes and meanings. Just a reminder to please share the podcast on Twitter and Facebook and leave us a review and let us know how we're doing. That helps us to get noticed out there in the podcast world and gets us more listeners. So please be sure to share the show with your friends. Also today, be sure to stick around to the very end of this episode because we have some very, 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 very exciting news to share. So you don't want to miss that. Today, we are continuing our series of character-devoted episodes, and we will be taking a deeper look at the character that could be arguably the most sinister in all of Star Wars. This character could be called as pulling all the strings, so to speak. No, I am not talking about Darth Sidious or even Darth Plagueis. I am talking about Jar Jar Binks, or as some call him, Darth Jar Jar. So joining me today on the panel are Thomas Senherho.
How's it going, Father?
It's going pretty well. And second up this evening is Mike Creevy. Hey, Mike.
Okie day.
You need to say that more sinister-like.
Well, I gotta say, I'm looking up a lot of Google images right now, too, of the Darth Jar Jar stuff, and there's some terrifying depictions.
Oh, yeah.
There's even one of him with a lightsaber. I'm pretty sure that's in canon, too, so.
That's all we need.
So, that being said, our podcast tonight is going to start. I'm going to start with a canon book called The Legends of Luke Skywalker. This was something that I stumbled across in doing some research for this episode. This book was published in 2017 as a lead up to Star Wars The Last Jedi. So in this book, there's a character named Reddy who is telling stories of old. And in it, an ex-Imperial engineer is talking about conspiracy theories and makes the following statement. He says, speaking of Naboo sardine fritters, did you know that Senator Jar Jar Binks and Lord Vader were the same person? End quote. So obviously we know that Jar Jar Binks and Vader are not the same person, as this Reddy is speaking, of course, of just hearsay and conspiracy theories. But we always know that there's a bit of truth in such theories and outlandish claims. So today we are going to dive into the truth of what is behind this particular idea, namely that Jar Jar Binks is a Sith Lord. What are your guys' initial thoughts of that? Yeah.
It's hard to avoid this conclusion. Like when you really sit down and look at it, there's just so many things that don't add up. And I think that's the thing that really grated on people when they first watched Phantom Menace, that this idiot of a character was almost single-handedly responsible for the win against the battle droids from the Gungans. And that bothers people. But you can account for that very easily because we see time and time again the Jedi are capable of winning against an entire fleet of battle droids, right? Mm-hmm. So that just as a starting point, that's kind of the theory doesn't bother me at all because it fits with so many other things, and we'll go outside of canon and talk about all the influences that Lucas has, I'm sure too. But just back to the Kurosawa roots of Star Wars. the Hidden Fortress, the movie opens with these two buffoons that the movie follows along. And in the original series, we see that as the droids. The two droids are kind of the buffoons that we follow throughout the story. But there was also another trope that he had that was the buffoon swordsman, right? Who was an idiot all the time, except for when he had to become the swordsman, and he would turn into the swordsman. And there were variations on it. So there was the drunken fighter that would maintain that idiocy, but still be really good at fighting. And that's kind of what you see in this version of Jar Jar, where we go, okay, let's take the blinders of the kid's goofiness off, and let's look at the deeper possibilities of this character that can, jump 20 feet in the air and shoot a blaster with his foot at all of these different battle droids. Yeah. So I'm totally comfortable with this theory. I think this is a fantastic way to look at Jar Jar and to take what happened in Phantom Menace at its face value.
Well, it's the bigger umbrella of subterfuge. I mean, the thing is, like, it's, Palpatine doesn't feign being a bumbling idiot, but he sure as heck schmoozes everybody, like it's a different kind of approach maybe, but I forget who it gets passed around, the quote, so I don't know who it's from, but that the greatest sort of deception the devil ever pulled was, by getting people to think he doesn't exist. So like that's great, if you can get someone to not believe that the threat's there. But if in a way maybe just as dangerous, what if people don't think it's a threat because they think that the person isn't threatening, and they are this lovable, affable kind of character. And in all seriousness, like we've seen in the real world, even in recent years, certain people, figures, celebrities, people even sometimes in the church, quite frankly, who, you thought was one thing or thought was, trustworthy or whatever, and then they weren't, and we're up to no good and we're feigning that. So like that just deception in general is obviously the devil's the father of lies, so if you're going to incorporate into your story something that's believable evil, you want to have that deception element there. And I'm sure we'll get to this later, but I know the one article Father had sent, or we were kind of discussing some of this, the guy in there pointed out, the luck thing, and we'll get into more detail later, but these things that seem to be just dumb luck on the part of Jar Jar. But my favorite character, Obi-Wan, did point out, as he mentions in the article, in A New Hope, in my experience, there's no such thing as luck. So is that a connection? I guess we'll see.
Yeah, well, it makes a certain amount of sense that this character is easy to just disregard and slip under the radar, and yet he is involved in some of the most critical aspects of everything that's going on within the Star Wars movie saga. He's instrumental in helping in the invasion of Naboo. He's there in the Senate. And he's this bumbling idiot, and yet he manages to become a general, and he manages to become, part of the Galactic Senate. And for being a bumbling idiot, he is awfully involved in all sorts of galactic wide things. So there is clearly more going on under the surface than just, as Mike said, dumb luck. This was carefully calculated. At least that's what we're looking at. So to begin at least an overall discussion on Darth Jar Jar, we need to do some laying down of some groundwork, because a lot of this stuff is just overlooked and missed, and so it's helpful to kind of try to take this apart. So we're going to look at a number of different aspects on why Jar Jar Binks is the Sith mastermind behind everything. And so first, we just need to talk about his skills as a warrior. So he is portrayed as this idiot. He stumbles all the time. He even in the Phantom Menace, he's with Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, and they're doing these amazing acrobatic feats, and Jar Jar is like falling off the bridge and yet
and still taking things out. He's still managing to do damage.
Right.
Constantly.
He is doing these aerobatic feats that are just that are seemingly not possible to the average person. If you take that particular scene where he falls off the bridge, quote unquote, falls off the bridge, and you really watch it, it's really kind of fun because when the camera shot is looking at Qui-Gon, Jar Jar is off to his left, behind him and to the left, and then when the camera turns and we're looking behind Qui-Gon forward, Jar Jar ends up landing to Qui-Gon's right.
Mm-hmm.
And if he just fell off the bridge, he would have stayed to his left. But like he somehow, at least in the movie, he like jumped completely across the path. So, coincidence or the use of force power? We also need to talk about the Battle of Naboo, which I think is probably the most striking example of his skills as a warrior. And we've already kind of mentioned it, that, for example, he takes out multiple droids with a blaster tangled around his ankle. Who in their normal set of skills could do that? He takes out a huge battle droid tank. He unleashes his barrage of bombas on the droids, and he's doing all of this in sort of what could be perceived as a goofy sort of manner. But again, there is an actual style of fighting that this is directly linked to.
Yeah, Drunken Fist, man. This is exactly what Drunken Fist is supposed to look like, right? Where if anyone's ever seen Jackie Chan at his best, that's what we're talking about.
I was wondering if that would come up. It has to come up.
Yeah, of course it does, right? Where it's just he's using the environment that he's given in creative ways and seems like he's having fun, but is really on top of everything, like a complete martial artist. Everything is a weapon for him. Everything is a setting for him to use to improve his fighting, to get the upper hand. And it throws your opponent off when you're not serious and angry and mad, but you seem like a bumbling idiot, but everything you're doing is very calculated and very carefully choreographed.
Does it have any connection? Because I'm not totally familiar with all the different connections. Is there a connection to judo at all, with like using momentum like that? Enemies' momentum, or is it a little different?
It takes a lot of different styles. It kind of pulls in mostly from some Chinese backgrounds. So it's a form of wuxia. So it's that kind of key momentum energy, and it's got a lot of really mystic backdrop to it, and so but it depends on the person being ready to fight in any situation, and then takes it to its logical its illogical, completely ridiculous conclusion of, okay, well, what if you're drunk? What if you're like stoned out of your mind, can't have no weapons on hand, and you're being attacked by somebody? What do you do?
It's a good contingency to prepare for, just in case.
And then to use that as like your baseline fighting style, it's a brilliant strategy, right?
Yeah.
And
it makes a lot of sense. Oh yeah, go ahead, Father. Sorry.
I was just going to say, if you YouTube this style of fighting, it's fun to watch, and it's this is totally a legitimate style of fighting. This is not just something that someone made up. So it's it completely throws the opponent off guard, and it confuses them, and it's unpredictable.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the point.
And I think really, it comes back to Bruce Lee's whole concept of fighting, where it was never be stuck in a form, right? Never be stuck in a single way of combat. And that kind of debunks everything that we know about the Jedi too, right? Because the Jedi are all about structure, all about that strict, making sure that you follow this code, which kind of lends more to, this would not be a fighting style that a Jedi would use. So you can kind of follow the dots here and go, okay, Jar Jar, really watching what he does, it is force-based stuff, right? There's no way. You don't see any of the other Gungans do any of the things that he does. So it's not like it's a racial trait that they can leap really high and do all these crazy acrobatics. And so this is unique to him. It's obviously on caliber with the Jedi because it's something that, it's causing massive amounts of destruction wherever he goes. He's basically single-handedly leading a unit that's not capable of fighting these droids at all into a victory. And this is not a style that would be conducive to the way the Jedi think about things. So you're left with one conclusion. I mean, there's really only one way to draw a line through this character.
Well, and that it was even just, from that instructional video, and there were all the different, like I had it here, Jar Jar kipping up, Jar Jar sloshing, sweeping the leg, and it's this comparison of each of those that's, I don't know, pretty compelling.
Well,
and his dodging the blaster shot thing, that was, watched that a few times. Wow, okay.
That's exactly where it's going to go, is that even during that whole battle, he is not injured hardly. I mean, he may have, sprained his ankle or but not really. But he dodges the blaster fire, and almost with a Force-like sensitivity and knowledge of where that fire is coming from. And he's in the middle of the entire battle. He's on the front line and doesn't get shot at all. So it just the evidence continues to pile up, in that there's more going on than just a ordinary Gungan that's bumbling about. The other major aspect of this, of course, is that he has incredible skill as a warrior, but also that he has use of the Force, which is something that is never explicit in the movies, but I think that's the beauty of it. That's kind of what Mike was talking about, is that this is the trick of seeing without really seeing what's going on. And so there are a number of examples of things that Jar Jar does that can only be explained by his using of the Force. So the first example of that would be the incredible acrobatics and the dodging of the blaster fire, and the falling off the bridge but landing in a completely different spot, as if he's defying the laws of gravity. The other really big example of this is that if you notice, whenever he's maneuvering himself into positions of power, he is waving his arms about as if he's using the Force to persuade. And there are a couple very clear examples of this. The first would be in The Phantom Menace, when he clearly is waving his hands to Boss Nass, and then is promoted to Bombad General.
And I just want to point out, again, none of the other Gungans do this. So it's not a culture. I am a Latin American male. I use my hands to speak. I just do it. We all do it. That you're speaking to somebody who's from Cuba because they are gesturing with their hands while they're talking, right? It's not a cultural thing. None of the other ones. Boss Nass is a little bombastic, and he's got the weird shaking of his head thing, but none of the Gungans use these extreme, insane movements of their hands. Jar Jar does. This is a difference.
when you just kind of think about it, Boss Nass would not have promoted Jar Jar based on merit, at least from what we've seen. Jar Jar has not proven himself whatsoever. So there is no rational reason for him to be promoted to Bombad General, except for the explanation that he's being manipulated through the Force. The other,
and we know that Boss Nass is, what is it, manipulatable? What's the word? He's impressionable.
Impressionable
with the Force, right? So because Qui-Gon's Qui-Gon's pretty quick with that whole mind trick thing. By the way, quick side note, I do have to mention, Father. I know I don't know if Thomas, if you've read Light of the Jedi yet, but I did find it funny. I'm not done with it, but I found it funny that they slip in there the idea that it's just some Jedi 400 years ago who started calling it the mind trick, and people were like, well, that's not really, but clearly it's caught on hundreds of years later. So I thought that was a fun little touch. Anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Speaking of that, aren't there Gungans in the Nihil?
There are. So they're not all good guys.
Correct. But I mean, yeah, so they are. That is another correlated piece of evidence of their potential for sinister organizations. The other big force manipulation Jedi mind trick that we see happen within the movies is in episode 2 when Jar Jar is in the Senate chambers and he convinces the entire Senate to give emergency powers to Chancellor Palpatine. And he is clearly using his hands as part of that whole process of manipulation.
And if it's not unnerving enough to have Jar Jar Binks promoted to a senator.
Yeah.
And for nobody else in the Galactic Senate to go, wait a minute, aren't these guys from the same planet?
Yeah.
There's nothing, with as much as, no, there was actually a blockade by the Trade Federation, and everybody in the Senate was like, no, we need to send a delegation to go check it out, right? We're not sure that that's really what's happening. I mean, with as much as they sit on their hands about everything, nobody's raising alarms about the fact that these guys are from the same planet, and suddenly everything's working out this way.
Which brings us to more evidence for this. Is Jar Jar a co-conspirator with Palpatine?
Yeah. Now, so this one's really interesting. In one of the Aftermath books, there is a nod to this where we see what happens to Jar Jar, and these are canon, right, Father? I think
yes,
because they came out in 2015 to 17. They are canon. So this is sort of a reference. Now, I'm of the persuasion that he's maintaining some of his laying low because he might still have plans, right? And he's on the planet, he's back on Naboo, and he's playing the clown. So all these refugee kids. So there's all these refugee kids that are coming back to Naboo after the fall of the Empire. And he is kind of stuck in that role, right, where he's playing the clown. And the way it talks about it, first off, is more of these acrobatic feats where he's like leaping out of the fountain, 20 feet into the air and jumping from side to side until he eventually lands on his head and then falls over on his butt. And that's kind of the whole sum of it. And the kids love it. They think, oh, bring out the clown. But then the character that we're following in this particular section actually has a conversation with him, actually goes to talk with him, and I'm not gonna read it because I can't do the Gungan justice. I am not gonna take Ahmed Best's work and try and do anything like what he did, because he did an amazing job with this role.
His last name is Best.
Yeah, yep. See, that's it. He did it best. But he basically says, so Jar Jar says, I think Jar Jar made some mistakes, and that's why everybody's ignoring him. Like, the kids love watching him, but all the adults are walking by just completely ignoring this clown figure that's leaping around for the kids. And when he's approached about it, he says he thinks it's because Jar Jar made some big mistakes. The bosses banished him long ago, and he hasn't been home in forever. And the Naboo think that he made a big mistake for the Empire, right? And so he's kind of alluding to what he did as, being part of, as people know that he was part of this conspiracy, right? And so I think there's something deeper there. I think there's something like a little more intensely conspiratorial about what he's doing. And now he's just kind of trying to lay low and stay out of the way. And if he has force powers, he could have it so that people ignore him. Mm-hmm. He could make it with as powerful as he seems to be. We talk a lot about Sidious at Qui-Gon's funeral, right? Standing there with all the other Jedi, and nobody notices that he's a Sith. But Jar Jar's standing right beside him, literally to his left at that funeral. Maybe they both have that same kind of ability to just disappear.
Well, it makes you wonder too, like, in the motivations of any Sith. I mean, because I never really thought of this till right now. And so, but I mean, would every Sith want to be the, Supreme Chancellor and Emperor, and necessarily, I don't know. Does pride and the search for power always manifest that way? Or is it, I mean, even Palpatine himself seems like in a lot of the canon books and stuff, like it's, administration of the galaxy isn't really what he's deeply about. Like it's he wants this, thirst for dark side knowledge and power. And so, could you have someone like Darth Jar Jar out of the limelight, playing the clown, and at night he goes back and he's doing his holocron study and his, who knows what, he's involved in searching out the mysteries of the unknown regions and Exegol and all that kind of stuff, the sorcery, and who knows. So I wonder about that too, what's he doing his off time?
I think that kind of a trait of wanting to be the center of attention is very clear in Emperor Palpatine, because once he declares himself emperor, I mean, it's all about him and his rule. But I think that trait isn't I don't think that trait is necessary for a Sith Lord.
Right.
So
you have Maul. Maul is the opposition to that, right? Working in the shadows constantly.
Yep. And I mean, any good villain is going to be able to be patient and is able to be, to wait in the shadows. And so, if Darth Jar Jar is the one pulling the strings even behind Palpatine, and then in Return of the Jedi, when Palpatine is seemingly killed, perhaps that wasn't exactly according to Jar Jar's plan. And so he has to bide his time and stay in the shadows and not draw attention to himself as he's waiting for perhaps even the rise of the First Order and Palpatine again. And that even doesn't even go according to his plan. So he could still be just, playing the clown and hiding in the shadows. And as a good villain, that is perfectly in line with what he could be up to.
Eventually, he's going to have that Thanos moment where he just opens the gauntlet cover and says, "Got to do it myself."
Me's going to do it myself. Like, oh man. Hey, look, Disney owns both the franchises now, so who knows? So talk about a multiverse of madness.
There's potential.
Right.
Going back to the relationship between Jar Jar and Palpatine, I did want to point out too that even in Revenge of the Sith, we see clearly Jar Jar and Palpatine working together. They're seen together. They're in the same meetings. They're working together. So even for those of you who might think that Jar Jar was just used to get emergency powers to Palpatine, if that were the case, Palpatine could have easily have just thrown him away. Why else would they be working clearly together in Revenge of the Sith, if not that Jar Jar is still intricately involved, even if that's not explicitly shown.
And he appears in Clone Wars in sort of a similar way. He's still a senator, still operating at full capacity, even after the sort of emergency powers issuance.
And again, that echoes, why would he be in that position if not because he force persuaded someone to let him be in that position? Same thing when he was Bombad General. I mean, he has no real merit to be in any of these positions.
Especially like thinking about Padme's character, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Padme does not have the patience for him, but there's bureaucracy that is obviously forcing her hand in some way, right? Otherwise, she would not put up with this guy at all if it weren't for some other insidious backdrop to it.
Mm-hmm.
She's good too at dismissing him. Was it at episode 2? He's rambling on, and she's like, "I don't want to keep you from your duties," and he's like, "Oh yeah," and he just which, by the way, I want to start remembering to do that in real life.
There's someone who's keep you from your duties.
Yeah, someone who's really, really bothering you. You're like, well, hey, look, I don't want to keep you. I'm sure you have somewhere to be. Like, oh yeah.
So I think one of the best things you can do here, and this is one of the in this Reddit string that we're talking about that is really good at kind of laying this argument out. They say that George Lucas backed off. He kind of chickened out of really making Jar Jar who he could have been potentially later in the series, because there's talk. I don't know, Father, were you wanting to go to talking about him and as a counterpost to Yoda
That was in my I've got a couple other things to mention too, but we'll go here first.
All right. Yeah, let's go ahead and segue there, because I think this is a good way to do it. Yeah. If you think about him as a counterpoint to Yoda, one of the arguments that this Redditor makes is that Yoda fights a Sith Master at the end of episode 2. And that Sith Master could have been Jar Jar Binks, right? So it could have been Jar Jar making his appearance as a Sith Master. And it makes total sense, right? And I think the easiest way to do this, because of the kind of baggage that comes with the Jar Jar Binks characters, go the other way, right? So take Christopher Lee and Count Dooku and the character that he is at that point, and move him back into episode 1. Instead of bringing Jar Jar Binks up into Count Dooku's place, move Count Dooku back to Jar Jar Binks' place, and he's playing this bumbling idiot that, just remove the Gungans altogether, make them all like another Naboo race that's all human and everything, and just think of that and play it all the way through, and then come to that moment where it's revealed, no, this guy's actually a Sith. He was apprenticed to Yoda and went to the dark side, and now is of equal power, is able to stand up to Yoda. And it makes so much more sense. Like you can actually see it that way. And I think it's just the Jar Jar baggage got taken. And if they had been as brave as everybody was with Ahsoka Tano in the Clone Wars, right? Because Ahsoka was an incredibly hated character.
Yep.
And now look at where she is, right?
Yeah.
So maybe there was some of that they just needed to push through and say, because if you think about Dooku's character in the movies and in the Clone Wars as a whole, Dooku seems much more powerful than Palpatine. Like Palpatine seems like he's not. You almost question why it is that they're not more equals than they seem to be when they're discussing things with each other. Because Dooku really does have the entire Federation on his side. He very easily could be the guy in charge coming out the other end. And it's questionable whether or not, it's going to be the Emperor or Dooku that come out the other end powerful. And we only know because we have the benefit of having seen 4, 5, and 6 first.
Well, and even from a certain perspective, Dooku felt like just the villain we needed for episode 2. Rather than, I mean, you don't hear about him at all in episode 1. So there's no, even going into episode 2, you get a bit of his backstory, but it's almost like they threw that in there because we needed to know where he came from. And so he sort of just was shoehorned into we need the villain rather than it being Jar Jar Binks who was stepping into that role. They threw Dooku into that.
Which is funny too, because a lot of the canon novels and such have really filled that in, I think, in a very helpful kind of way. But I think the last time I did a watch through the movies, just going off of them, I'd almost not forgotten, but it's just when you watch them again, it is sort of like Count Dooku, who is this guy? Now he's a big thing. Everyone, and it's they not cheating, but it's a little, the story has jumped 10 years.
Right.
A lot has happened. Okay, I guess. But yeah, it does make you wonder if there was other stuff going on behind the scenes with that.
And it's important, I think, for movie storytelling. I mean, even though it jumped 10 years, there's got to be continuity. Because otherwise, because not everybody's going to read the books and not everybody's going to know what's happening behind the scenes. So if you're just doing a movie saga, there's got to be that continuity. And yeah, I think they've done a lot.
Especially if he's, especially if Dooku's this, legendary Jedi who's the master of Qui-Gon and Yoda's Padawan. Come on. It's a little, nothing on him the first,
So I found that parallel between Jar Jar and Yoda very, very interesting. I wanted to throw out a quote that George Lucas had made in reference to Yoda, because it was meant to be applied to Jar Jar, even though this didn't play out in the movies exactly. But he said this about Yoda. He said, Yoda really comes from a tradition in mythology, in mythological storytelling, fairy tales, of the hero finding a little creature on the side of a road that seems very insignificant and not very important, but who turns out to be the master wizard. And that is Yoda to a T. I mean, Luke Skywalker encounters this creature who's just eating his food and hitting R2-D2, and he turns out to be the greatest Jedi, arguably one of the greatest Jedi, I guess, of the era. And that was supposed to be echoed and paralleled in the prequel trilogy, with Jar Jar being that insignificant little creature found on the side of the road who turns out to have a much more pivotal role. And instead of Yoda, of course, being the Jedi Master, Jar Jar was aimed at being the inverse, the Sith Lord behind everything. And even Ahmed Best confirmed this in a 2015 tweet. So we have confirmation, and we can share that link. Proof. Was there anything else that you guys wanted to say about that relationship?
Well, I think you can. I think you can be deceived to thinking that Anakin kind of fits that role, right? Because they discover him as a child and bring him in, but he's more central to the story. He's too central to the story to be that little creature they find on the side of the road that then becomes so pivotal. And so you really are left with, if you don't have Jar Jar being that figure, then there is not one for the original three or the episodes 1, 2, and 3.
Anakin's the pathetic life form that they picked up on Tatooine.
Well, Obi-Wan calls that, right? He's one way since we've picked up another pathetic life form.
Well, what's funny is that Redditor actually pointed out too that, you know, the sort of disturbance that Jar Jar causes, the scene he causes in the market, really leads to their connection with him. I mean, they've bumped into him in the shop, if I'm remembering the order of it right, but it's that sort of disturbance that leads to them actually kind of connecting and then following him home in the sandstorm and everything. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Any coincidences, really?
I mean, that's exactly where I was going to go, is because Jar Jar, it can be seen as manipulating all of these events. So the Redditor pointed out that, I mean, he encounters Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan in the swamps of Naboo, and he convinces them, 2 Jedi, that they need him to go through the planet core. Yeah. So already he's thrown himself into their company, probably being able to predict the future, that they're going to get stuck on Tatooine, and he can, encounter the Chosen One and aim at his corruption. And then just like you, Mike, pointed out, that he creates the scene with Sebulba, I think, that causes them to meet with Anakin and for them to be brought to their house. And one of the other things that I thought was really interesting is that he pointed out that Jar Jar is constantly mocking Qui-Gon behind his back.
Oh, yeah.
And so he is subtly letting Anakin see that without Qui-Gon knowing it, so that Anakin learns disrespect for Jedi authority early on.
It's like a gateway drug of disciplinary issues,
Well, and I would challenge the fact that Qui-Gon doesn't know what's going on. I think Qui-Gon is actually more aware, because Qui-Gon's like such a pivotal figure, right? And he knows there's something wrong with the Jedi Order. That's one of the things that we've kind of been Filoni honed in on really well, and has made his entire career in Star Wars on that sort of concept. And you see this moment that is very jarring, as comical and goofy as Jar Jar is. There's that moment where they're sitting in the house, and he sticks his tongue out to grab a piece of fruit, and Qui-Gon grabs his tongue. And it's a very aggressive thing to have happen, right? To like just grab somebody's tongue out of the air. And it's framed in this like, oh, well, Jedi have advanced reflexes and they can do things like this. But it's also like he just grabbed this guy's tongue and like held onto it and stared at him for a moment. And there's so many things. There's several different things that Qui-Gon never really gets to reveal to everybody, because he just doesn't have time with the way that everything falls out. He just doesn't have time to sit Obi-Wan down and talk to him about, what he sees in Anakin and what he thinks Anakin needs and all that kind of stuff. But I think that this is also another moment where he sees into the depths of who Jar Jar might be and just doesn't have time to lay it out for anyone.
Taking that farther, now go with me here. If Jar Jar is as powerful as we know he is, he could have easily stopped Darth Maul on Tatooine. But he chose not to. He didn't intervene. And he let Darth Maul continue his quest, and ultimately that leads toward and to Qui-Gon's death.
Mm-hmm. Take the obstacles out of the way, right?
So, I mean, you know.
He did grab his tongue. Yeah,
look,
he's got to die. he's got to go.
So, what do you guys think? Is he a good villain?
He's either the best villain or the worst villain, right?
I think. I mean, I'm a little disappointed because at the end of the Reddit article we were looking at too, he starts speculating about the sequel trilogy, because I think this was 2015 or 14 or 15, late 2015 before it came out, and my favorite one was his theory that Jar Jar is Snoke.
Mm-hmm.
So I still want to make that work in a weird way. I don't know, but
that would be a more fitting
backstory
backstory for Snoke than what we got.
Yes, it would be. Oh man,
I think there may have been a missed opportunity. I agree with the Reddit thread where it's kind of that Lucas backed out of what could have potentially been really like a really dark shift. You know, the kind of Luke, I am your father shift that Vader had at the end of Empire. Where you have Jar Jar show up as Dooku, right? As this other comparable Sith Lord, and then be the head of the Trade Federation throughout the rest of it. I think that could have made what was a sort of goofy character suddenly stand out as quite an amazing character. And it would have made for an incredible fight scene. Let me just tell you, Yoda's acrobatics and Jar Jar's acrobatics at the same time. And you hear a lot, and this is I want to point out that I don't think it's that Lucas like chickened out. I think it's that you hear a lot of him talking about the fact that the technology was better for episodes 1, 2, and 3 than it was for 4, 5, and 6. And so he was able to expand on his world more, but he was still upset. He was still sad that it wasn't quite at the level that he wanted it to be able to have, you know, the product that he wanted. And that could be that kind of moment, right? Where you have two completely CG characters going into a battle together and it being believable, credible, and coming across on the screen in a reasonable way. And that could have been one of those things where they ran tests for it and it just didn't work. And he had to back out and say, okay, well, we need to make this. We have to put a real character up against this CG character to make it operate.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to completely change the story at that point.
But he still plays his role of, manipulation and, I mean, getting emergency powers to Palpatine and the rise of the Empire, you know, and all of that. He's not quite as goofy in episodes 2 or 3, but he still plays those roles. And what a kind of unexpected twist that would have been, especially and I would almost feel sorry for like all the kids who watched episode 1 who like, I mean, I remember going to, it was either McDonald's or Burger King, and they were like, you could get these like cups that had Boss Nass with a straw like in his mouth, and one of them was a Jar Jar with, you know, the straw in his mouth. Very creepy, but like as a kid, I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And so like, you know, how many kids out there who would have just like loved Jar Jar, and the parents, of course, hated him, but then having in episode 2 that completely shift, and he is revealed to be the Sith Lord behind everything.
What's like finding out Barney's an arms dealer? You know, like or some just completely completely undermine childhood innocence. Like what? Like why are there all those AK-47s behind Barney? Like, oh my gosh, like terrifying, like Jar Jar like force lightning trying to kill Obi-Wan. Like what?
I think that's part of the charm of this whole way of looking at Jar Jar Binks, though, right? It's like, you know, for those people who were at the right age to really enjoy Jar Jar when he was in Episode 1, coming of age in this universe where you're like, wait a minute, there's some really truly evil things. Wait a minute. What about this guy that everybody hates that I really liked? What if he was really cool too?
Well, and if you just Google Darth Jar Jar, there is some really crazy cool depictions of him as a Sith Lord, which they're cool. I guess, it's what are your guys' favorite moments with our beloved Sith Lord?
When I saw it, because it's tricky because I'm looking back at where I was at. I don't think I ever embraced like really, maybe as much as some people, that kind of jaded teenager kind of attitude, like deliberately. I think deep down I still had a childlike sense of wonder. Which and I think we've talked about this before. That doesn't do you a lot of good in high school when you're a huge Star Wars fan. But for some reason, now that I'm 37 years old and I'm standing, I talk about Star Wars like all the time to my students, and like I can just tell they're like, most of them are like, please stop, but I'm like, no, I'm gonna have my fun now, okay? No, but so I was 14 or 15, I think. Yeah, I was 15 when Episode 1 came out, and I'm seeing myself more as like a growing up or an emerging adult, whatever, So I think I was already, when I saw it, a little like, well, this guy, it's a little much. But I think I seem to remember kind of enjoying some of his antics, at least the first go around. And the one that immediately came to mind was when he gets his tongue, caught in the power coupling. I don't know why. Yes. I just think it's like just dangling out. And I don't know if it's because of like the maybe a little a little bit forced that right before that Annie is warning him about it, and that's what happens. But it's like, well, did he do that because? Was that enough? He's like, oh yeah, that would make him think I'm even more stupid than I am. So I don't know. I'm tainted now. I'm going to see this everywhere. So that's
hard.
The one
it's hard not to once you've got an insight on it. It's like it's there. It's right there. It's really. I love that scene too, though, because like again, this goes back to the voice acting, and Ahmed Best was actually like part of so he was there. I don't know if you've seen any of the behind the scenes stuff. He was there, and he had this rig on his head that everybody knew to look up to.
Was it kind of like mocap or not? It's really early for that. Yeah,
it was still really early for mocap, but they were doing some of that with his facial facial expressions. So this is really early like CG technology. So he was actually present on the scene, but his voice acting for that, right? For how do you act a character with a numb tongue? He gets across the lines clearly enough that you understand what he's saying, but also clearly enough that you have that he just got out of the dentist and his whole mouth is numbed up kind of thing.
Maybe they just put lidocaine in his mouth for that,
right? It could be. I mean, but he does a really good job.
That's thank you. Which like R2, like even in Return of the Jedi, like when he's in the swamp, that little like whistling thank you, like to be able to express it's hard to do that, through a non-normal sort of means.
Yeah, I think we need to just give props to Ahmed Best. I mean, he is such an amazing actor, and he's gotten so much unfortunate hate for this role.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
But he
has the best attitude.
Yeah.
He's really put up with it. Yeah. And he's had a great redemption story inside of the Star Wars universe because he is now training the Jedi.
Yes,
right.
So, if you haven't watched the show on Disney Plus, it's called Star Wars Jedi Temple Challenge, and it's actually really good.
I don't think it's on Disney Plus. It's on YouTube Kids, I think.
Oh, is it on YouTube Kids?
Oh, is it? Okay. Yeah.
They had it on.
Do they have it on Disney Plus?
I thought they did. I thought that's where we saw it.
If they
maybe
did,
it's not.
I know I've had to go to YouTube to find it. YouTube Kids.
Okay,
but
all right.
Either way, Jedi Temple Challenge is really fun to watch. Yeah, and he's great. He's phenomenal in that.
And there's definitely that added benefit of seeing him there. And if you know who he is, if you knew, you know, where he was from in the start, when he first came up as the trainer, I was like, oh, this is great. This is really fantastic. So I had to spend a minute explaining it to my kids.
what better person who played a character that was supposed to be the kid-friendly character in episode 1. He is now training the kids, the Padawans.
Right.
You know,
exactly.
It's so appropriate. And he didn't get jaded and just leave Star Wars and hate everything behind, but rather he's continuing to invest and involve himself. And that is just super cool to see.
Class act.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Yep.
I did want to share my favorite moment with Jar Jar. As a kid, and I've just always loved the Battle for Naboo or Battle of Naboo. I forget which version it's called, but the whole when he's like accidentally releasing all the bombs and they're destroying all the droids, and I mean the whole sequence. I loved it as a kid because it was so Jar Jar. And of course, at that point in my life, it was like, this is the slapstick comedy stuff that I'm all about. And of course, now looking at it with a keener eye, more going on under the surface. But so that would be my favorite Jar Jar moment.
Mine comes in that scene too, where he's when all the droids shut down. And he walks over to one of them and just punches it in the nose, and it falls apart.
Yeah. Any stray observations on Darth Jar Jar?
It's also funny when he accidentally says "Dello Feligates" instead of "fellow delegates." But that could just be nerves. Or again, are they?
Are they really? But I think, you know, if you look at Darth Sidious and who Emperor Palpatine and who he is, he's playing a hiding game, and his charisma was to be affable, right? Was to just be that person without a face, right? Who was just the guy that you could talk to, you could trust him, that quintessential politician, and to stay out of any direct combat. You don't see him with a lightsaber until he absolutely must use a lightsaber. And even then, he doesn't use it. The interesting thing about Palpatine is something you kind of have to always go back to. Even then, he's the one defending himself, right? He pulls out his lightsaber to defend himself from the 3 Jedi that come into his room with their lightsabers drawn, ready to take him into into custody. And that's when he pulls out his lightsaber to defend himself. So just throwing that out there with the, you know, thinking about the Jedi code with a grain of salt, right? But you've got that's his way of doing things, is to work from the shadows. And if you have a character that has all of these capabilities and then is able to do the same thing, like they're cut from the same cloth, they had the same master, they studied possibly under Darth Plagueis, both of them. They knew how to hide themselves. It's just that his way of hiding them, Jar Jar's way of hiding himself, was to be friendly in a different way, was to be affable in a different way, to completely remove the possibility that he is a threat, all the while defending himself with the means that he has available to him.
Both of them were the experts at hiding in plain sight.
Exactly. And it fits for them to have been, you know, kind of tutored together as apprentices to Plagueis, and then to have that same skill set.
Well, and being from the same planet, I mean, there's too much that is tying them together than not. So perhaps we'll see a Darth Jar Jar come up in a future novel or movie.
Hopefully everybody's mind is sufficiently blown.
He's still alive. He's still alive at the end of that book and at the end of Aftermath, which is canon.
Yep.
So he's still alive. He's still kicking around.
Yep. Well, I think that then kind of concludes at least our thoughts and opinions on Darth Jar Jar. But listeners, we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts and opinions on the most sinister Sith Lord of all time, Jar Jar Binks? Was he truly a villain, or was he just a bumbling idiot? By the way, guys, did you notice that this podcast episode is going to be released on April 1st this year? Crazy coincidental, right?
There are no coincidences.
That just so happens to be April Fool's Day here in the United States. Anyways, listeners, we are trying to wrap this thing up right now. And so, of course, please let us know if there is a character that you want us to talk about. You can email us or comment on our Facebook or Twitter page and let us know. You can email us any feedback at starwars@sqpn.com. And you can find StarQuest on Facebook at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia and on Twitter at SQPN. At this point, we would like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Wars, including this week, Father John E., Priscilla H., Jennifer W., Douglas C., and Darius M. Now is a great time to become a StarQuest patron, thanks to a generous gift from a StarQuest supporter. When you start a new Patreon monthly pledge at sqpn.com/give, the first 3 months will be matched by an equal amount from our donor. So if you become a new patron at $10 per month, after 3 months, our donor will give $30 to StarQuest to support all our shows, including this one, making your gift go even further. So if you have been thinking of becoming a StarQuest patron, now is the time. Visit sqpn.com/give today. Also, of course, be sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss a episode, especially a fun one like this. And you can subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or you can find us on YouTube. Just search for the SQPN YouTube channel and click that bell to get notifications for new episodes. And as always, you can find any previous episodes of The Secrets of Star Wars by visiting sqpn.com/Star Wars. And we will be back in 2 weeks to continue our character series by taking a deeper look into one of the best characters from Star Wars Rebels. We are going to be looking at Hera Syndulla. And there's a very specific reason we are going to be talking about Hera, because I am thrilled to announce that after our episode about talking about Hera, we are honored to have the voice actor behind Hera herself on the show, Vanessa Marshall.
Yay!
Listeners, this is not an April Fool's Day joke.
I was going to say, you better clarify if this is actually happening now that we did that.
I have been in touch with Vanessa Marshall, and she is going to be joining us on the show later in April. So she will be on the show in the episode after we talk about Hera. So she will be joining us to talk about all things Hera and her experience voice acting such an iconic character. And patrons, this is important for you to listen up to this point. This is an exciting opportunity for you, as we want to give you a special thank you as patrons of the show. So you can log into your patron account, and on the SQPN patron page, we will have a post where you can give us your questions to ask Vanessa when she's on the podcast. So this is your chance to help guide our discussion with Vanessa through questions you want Vanessa to answer. And so we will compile those questions we receive and do our best to get them proposed to Vanessa. So patrons, you definitely don't want to miss out on this. And so once again, if you would like to become a patron of SQPN and participate in that, please go to sqpn.com/give. So we've got a number of exciting things happening. And then, of course, after our episode with Vanessa Marshall, we will be doing a special May 4th podcast episode. So stay tuned for more information about that. So until next time, Thomas Sanjurjo, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Star Wars.
It has been a great pleasure.
And Mike Creevy, thanks for joining us this evening as well.
Absolutely.
And once again, I'm Father Andrew Kinstetter. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Star Wars on StarQuest.